Sydney Sweeney stood in the corner of the Euphoria wrap party, watching Zendaya hold court with executives, her Emmy gleaming under the lights. The smile on Sydney's face was perfectly practiced, but behind it burned a resentment that had been building for 2 years. What the cameras never captured, what the press releases never mentioned, was the Cold War between Euphoria's 2 biggest stars, a rivalry that would eventually explode in the most public way possible. The first day on Euphoria's set had been magical. Sydney, fresh off small indie roles, couldn't believe she was working for HBO. When Zendaya walked in, already a household name from Spider-Man, Sydney felt starstruck. "You must be Sydney." Zendaya had embraced her warmly. "I've seen your audition tape like 5 times. You're incredible. We're going to have so much fun." For the first few weeks, it seemed genuine. Zendaya invited Sydney to lunch, gave her tips about handling HBO's publicity machine, even posted Instagram stories praising Sydney's performance. The media ate it up. Euphoria's leading ladies were best friends. But Sydney began noticing things. How Zendaya's compliments always had an edge. "You're so brave to do those nude scenes. I could never." How she'd subtly redirect conversations with directors when Sydney had suggestions. How her smile never quite reached her eyes when Sydney received praise. The first real crack came during a table read. Sam Levinson had written a powerful monologue for Cassie, Sydney's character. As Sydney delivered it, she felt the room's energy shift. Even the executives were captivated. When she finished, there was a moment of awed silence. "That was phenomenal," Sam said. "We might need to expand this scene." Sydney caught Zendaya's expression, a flash of something cold before the practiced smile returned. "Amazing job, Sid. Though maybe we should be careful about making the episode too Cassie-heavy. Balance is important." It was subtle, but Sydney heard it. The first shot fired. As season 1 progressed, the dynamic shifted. Sydney's character became a fan favorite. Social media exploded with Cassie compilations. Sydney Sweeney's acting masterclass became a trending topic. Fashion brands started calling. Zendaya remained the lead, the bigger name, but Sydney was catching up fast. Too fast for Zendaya's comfort. "Interesting how much screen time you got in episode 4, Zendaya mentioned casually one day, scrolling through her phone. "Some fans are saying it feels like the Cassie show now." Sam wrote those scenes. "I just performed them." "Of course. I'm just saying, ensemble shows work best when they stay ensemble." Sydney learned to decode Zendaya's language. Concern for the show meant protecting her territory. Ensemble balance meant keeping Sydney in her place. The Hollywood Reporter published a feature on Euphoria's breakout stars. Sydney's photo was larger than expected, the article focusing heavily on her performance. That week, Zendaya's team released a strategic PR blast: charity work, fashion campaigns, reminders of her film career. "It's not personal," Jacob Elordi told Sydney one day. "Z's just protective of her position. She worked hard to get here." "So did I," Sydney replied. "Just because I didn't have Disney's machine behind me doesn't mean I don't deserve recognition." But the competition was exhausting. Every scene became a battle. If Sydney cried, Zendaya cried harder. If Sydney improvised a moment that worked, Zendaya would suggest 3 more takes with variations. During a particularly intense night shoot, Sydney overheard Zendaya talking to Sam Levinson in his trailer. "I'm just concerned about the show's direction. Rue is the heart of Euphoria. If we lose focus on that." "No one's losing focus, Z. Sydney's just having a great season." "I know. She's talented. I just want to make sure we're telling the right story." Sydney realized then that this wasn't about friendship or ensemble balance. This was about power, and Zendaya saw her as a threat. The Emmy campaign season brought new tensions. HBO pushed both actresses for nominations, Zendaya for lead actress, Sydney for supporting. It should have been straightforward, but nothing between them ever was. "Congratulations on the campaign," Zendaya said during a publicity shoot, both wearing designer gowns worth more than cars. "Supporting actress is such a competitive category this year." "So is lead," Sydney replied evenly. "Must be pressure, being the youngest nominee. I try not to think about it. Awards aren't why we do this, right? But they both knew that was a lie. Awards meant power, better roles, higher quotes. And they both wanted to win. The Rayol explosion came when Marvel called. Not for a meeting, not for a general, but for a specific role: Spider-Woman. A role that would exist in Zendaya's Spider-Man universe. Sydney found out she was testing the same day Zendaya did. They ran into each other at the Marvel offices, both pretending surprise. "What are you doing here?" Zendaya's voice was light, but her eyes were calculating. "Same as you, I assume. Testing for Julia Carpenter." "Oh." Zendaya's smile tightened. "I didn't know they were seeing people today." They sat in the same waiting room, scripts in hand, the air thick with unspoken tension. Other actresses came and went, but everyone knew it was between the Euphoria stars. "May the best woman win," Zendaya said when Sydney was called in. "Planning to," Sydney replied. The test went perfectly. Sydney nailed the emotional scenes, the action sequences, even the chemistry read with Tom Holland, who seemed genuinely impressed. But as she left, she overheard Zendaya in the hallway with Kevin Feige. "I just want to make sure this won't complicate things with the Spider-Man films. Having someone from the same show might confuse audiences." Sydney's blood boiled. Zendaya was trying to sabotage her before the decision was even made. That night, the internet exploded. Someone leaked that both Euphoria stars were up for the same Marvel role. Fan armies mobilized. Hashtag Team Zendaya and hashtag Team Sydney trended worldwide. The harmony they'd maintained publicly was shattered. "Did you leak it?" Zendaya confronted Sydney the next day on set. "Did you tell Feige I'd confuse audiences?" They stared at each other, masks finally off. "I've been nothing but welcoming to you," Zendaya said quietly. "I helped you navigate this world. You helped me stay in my place. There's a difference. I'm the lead of this show, Sydney. That's not ego, it's fact. And I'm a threat to that. Also a fact." The Cold War became Arctic. They spoke only when cameras rolled. Their scenes together crackled with real tension that directors mistook for brilliant acting. The crew walked on eggshells, choosing sides without meaning to. Sydney booked the Marvel role. She found out via a call from Kevin Feige himself, praising her unique take on the character. The news hadn't gone public yet, but Zendaya knew. She had to, her team was too connected not to know. "Congratulations," Zendaya said the next day, the word like ice. "I'm sure you'll be great." "Thanks. I know this must be difficult." "Why?" "Because I didn't get one role out of hundreds. Please. I'm happy for you." But that night, Zendaya posted an Instagram story, a quote about knowing your worth and not letting others dim your light. Her fans read between the lines. The attacks on Sydney started within hours. Stealing roles from black women. Using Zendaya for clout. Sydney Sweeney is a snake. Sydney watched her mentions fill with hate, knowing Zendaya could stop it with one word. But that word never came. The breaking point came during a pivotal season 2 scene. Rue and Cassie's confrontation, a moment requiring both actresses to dig deep. They'd been rehearsing for hours, the tension building both on and off camera. "You're pushing too hard in the opening beat," Zendaya said during a break. "It's making my reaction feel small." "Maybe your reaction is small," Sydney shot back. "Not everything has to be calibrated to make you look better." Sam Levinson tried to mediate. "Let's take 5, everyone." "No," Zendaya stood up. "Let's talk about this. You've had an attitude for months." "I've had an attitude? You've been undermining me since day one. Every compliment has a barb, every opportunity you try to block." "I made you." Zendaya's composure finally cracked. "When you showed up, you were nobody. I vouched for you, included you, and this is how you repay me? By trying to steal my thunder." "Your thunder? God, do you hear yourself? Everything isn't about you, Zendaya. Maybe, just maybe, I earned my success. In nude scenes and shock value? Please. You're a sideshow, Sydney. I'm the star." The set went silent. Crew members looked away. Phones appeared in hands. This was too juicy not to document. At least I don't need Disney to manufacture my talent, Sydney said quietly. At least when I cry on camera, it's acting, not just my default when I don't get my way. Zendaya slapped her. The sound echoed through the soundstage. Sydney's hand went to her cheek, shock replacing anger. Zendaya looked equally stunned, as if her hand had acted without permission. What the hell? Jacob stepped between them. Sydney, But Sydney was already walking off set. The damage was done. Within an hour, the story leaked. Euphoria star's physical fight on set dominated social media. Blurry videos circulated. HBO went into crisis mode. The network demanded a meeting. Sydney and Zendaya sat at opposite ends of a conference table, lawyers and publicists between them like a buffer zone. This ends now, the HBO executive said. Whatever personal issues you have, they cannot affect production. We have tens of millions invested in this show. She assaulted me, Sydney stated simply. That's not a personal issue, it's a legal one. It was a moment of anger, Zendaya's lawyer interjected. Ms. Coleman deeply regrets. Regrets getting caught or regrets showing her true colors? Sydney, please, Sam Levinson looked exhausted. We can work through this. But the damage was spreading. Entertainment sites picked up the story. Talk shows discussed it. The fandoms went to war, dissecting every interview and photo for signs of the feud. Marvel called Sydney. Her Spider-Woman announcement was being postponed indefinitely. We can't introduce you into the universe while this drama is happening, they explained. It overshadows the work. Sydney realized Zendaya had won without even trying. The show must go on, so they returned to set. But now there were rules. Separate call times. Minimal direct scenes. Body doubles for anything requiring physical proximity. The magic of Euphoria was poisoned by their reality. During one of the few scenes they had to film together, Zendaya whispered between takes, I never meant for it to go this far. Yes, you did, Sydney replied. You just didn't expect consequences. I was threatened by you. Is that what you want to hear? You came in and suddenly everyone was talking about Sydney Sweeney like you were the second coming. I worked for years to get here. And I respect that. But your journey doesn't invalidate mine. They looked at each other, really looked, for the first time in months. Two young women, both talented, both ambitious, turned into enemies by an industry that profited from their conflict. The truth about their feud came from an unexpected source. A former HBO executive named Patricia Wells reached out to both actresses separately, claiming she had information they needed to hear. Sydney met her first, suspicious but curious. You and Zendaya were set up from the beginning, Patricia said without preamble. The network knew putting two strong young women together would create tension. They encouraged it. That's ridiculous. Patricia produced emails, meeting notes, strategy documents. Look at the publicity timeline. Every time you two got along too well, they'd plant a story to create friction. When you supported each other publicly, they'd arrange competing interviews. They wanted drama. Sydney read through the evidence, her anger shifting targets. Leaked audition schedules. Strategic press releases. Even the Marvel audition, HBO had pushed both actresses to test, knowing it would create conflict. Why? Sydney asked. Because your feud generated more publicity than any campaign could buy. Euphoria's ratings spiked every time you two had public tension. You were manipulated into hating each other for profit. Sydney met Zendaya at a neutral location, a small cafe in Malibu where no one would recognize them. She shared Patricia's information and watched Zendaya's face cycle through the same emotions she'd experienced. They played us, Zendaya said quietly. Like puppets. The Emmy campaign positioning. The Marvel leak. Even our scenes together, they kept rewriting them to create more friction between our characters. And we fell for it. God, Sydney, I hit you. I actually hit you because I was so caught up in this manufactured competition. For the first time in over a year, they really talked. About the pressure, the insecurity, the fear of being replaced. About how the industry had trained them to see each other as threats instead of allies. "I was jealous," Zendaya admitted. "You're an incredible actress. When you did that bathroom breakdown scene, I went to my trailer and cried because I knew I couldn't have done it better. I was intimidated by you from day one. You had everything figured out, this whole career path. I was just trying not to drown." They compared notes, finding the manipulation everywhere. How their publicists had been instructed to book competing appearances. How interview questions were designed to create sound bites that could be taken out of context. How their own teams had been incentivized to maintain the rivalry. "What do we do now?" Sydney asked. "We could expose them. Go public with everything. Or..." Zendaya smiled, the first genuine smile Sydney had seen from her in months. "Or we use it against them." The Season 2 finale approached, and with it, massive publicity obligations. Sydney and Zendaya had a plan. They began slowly. A casual Instagram story of them having coffee. Matching outfits by accident at a press event. Small gestures that confused the narrative. "Are you two okay now?" Interviewers asked, desperate for drama. "We were always okay," Zendaya would say. "The media created a story that didn't exist." "Zendaya's been nothing but supportive," Sydney would add. "We're grateful to work together." The network panicked. Without the feud, their publicity strategy crumbled. They tried to create new friction, scheduling conflicts, competing magazine covers, strategic leaks. But Sydney and Zendaya had learned the game. They did a joint interview with Oprah, laying out everything. The manipulation, the manufactured drama, how young women in Hollywood were pitted against each other for profit. They had receipts, emails, recordings, documentation Patricia had provided. "We refuse to be part of this narrative anymore," Zendaya said, holding Sydney's hand. "We're colleagues, we're friends, and we support each other. The only people who benefit from us fighting are the ones making money off the conflict," Sydney added. "We're done being their entertainment." The interview broke the internet. HBO stock dipped. Executives were fired. The toxic system they'd exposed faced real scrutiny for the first time. But more importantly, Sydney and Zendaya found something neither had expected: genuine friendship. Not the performative kind for cameras, but real understanding born from shared experience. At the Emmy Awards, they sat together, their nominations in different categories no longer a source of tension. When Zendaya won, Sydney was the first to stand and applaud. When Sydney's Marvel movie was announced, Zendaya posted a heartfelt congratulations that silenced the fan wars. "You know what the funniest part is?" Zendaya said at the after-party, both of them slightly drunk on champagne and victory. "We're both better actresses because of this whole mess. Pushing each other, even for the wrong reasons, made us grow." "Trauma bonding at its finest," Sydney laughed. "Though next time, maybe we skip the part where you slap me?" "Deal." Though it did make for a great scene in therapy. They looked out at the Hollywood party surrounding them, the same people who'd profited from their pain now celebrating their success. But they'd learned something valuable. In an industry designed to isolate and divide, solidarity was the most rebellious act possible. The real truth between Sydney Sweeney and Zendaya wasn't about rivalry or friendship. It was about two young women who refused to let a system define their relationship. Who chose each other over the narrative being sold. And in Hollywood, that was the most powerful truth of all.